take home the gold. He could be too far. No, he's digging. Oh, what a catch!
Puts a spicy forehand out in front of Naomi Morsilla.
Wu for the win. Team Canada. Garrett Wu!
Santos with the layout grab.
Oh, that fantastic grab. The claws of Chaffer.
Canada just became the world champions. Hello and welcome to the Huckin podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Danie Proby from New SBC.
And I'm Ari, a guest host from also New SBC, and we are your coast-to-coast guide to all things Canadian Ultimate.
Speaking of Ultimate, how was your weekend, Ari?
It was fantastic. It was my first time coaching UBC at a U.S. college tournament. We did go to an earlier one at CUUC, so
how did that go for you?
It was great. We came 7th. Some close losses, universe point losses to Cal Poly, who eventually won, and also a close universe point loss to UCLA in the quarterfinals. So I think, really excited for Stanford and for moving forwards in the season.
Well, you just threw way too many spoilers for those folks who are going to be listening to the next part of the news. But for you as a coach, did you enjoy your experience?
Totally. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I haven't actually played College Ultimate before, so it was fun to see all the hype from the sidelines and from the players and just seeing them hang out, after a tournament is always really fun to see as a coach.
What do you think the biggest difference is between club tournaments and college tournaments?
The turnovers. There's a few more turnovers than I'm used to, which is all good. I feel like I just had to, once I had my level of average of what to expect of a couple turnovers a game, a couple, 5 turnovers per point on the goal line, then I can just, be happy with the results.
Oh my, throwing some gentle shade at UVC right now, but do you feel like we know each other well enough after this get to know you part?
Yeah, no, we're good.
Okay, so we're going to head to the news after a quick break, and then we are going to be talking to 2 players from the University of Victoria women's team. They had a very successful time down in Santa Barbara, so we're going to head to the news, then we're going to head to the main event right away.
We now have breaking news.
All right, welcome to the news section. Not a lot to report other than we're going to be breaking down kind of UVic Open and UBC Open's experience at Santa Barbara Invite. But the only non-Santa Barbara related news that I have to say is that the Ultimate Canada Online Competition Development Clinic has changed dates. So it's now actually going to be February 18th and 19th. And it was changed due to unforeseen circumstances.
Ooh.
Ominous. I hope everyone's okay. I don't know. It does sound kind of ominous. So on to Santa Barbara. So I am so lucky to have Ari here because he was actually there, so he can get a little bit more color to the kind of scores that I'm seeing. Even though both the UVic and the UBC Open teams were posting stuff on social media sometimes, it wasn't really enough to kind of get a general idea of what was going on. So I know when we recorded the preview, initially, UVic and UBC were supposed to be in the same pool. Do you know why that switched?
No idea, actually. We just woke up and it switched, and, we were glad because we probably play UVic 5 or 6 times this season, so it was a welcome change.
But spoiler alert for later, you still ended up playing them.
That is indeed correct.
Okay, so UVic was in Pool A, so their first game was against Case Western Reserve. My first question to you, Ari, is who is Case Western Reserve?
I definitely had to look that up. I did happen to watch one of their games. They had some very interesting cheers. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it on air.
Is it swearing?
Nope, no swearing.
You could be like PG-13 on this pod. 14A.
Okay, well, I thought it was pretty funny. So one of the guys will take off their shirt, obviously. This is College Ultimate.
Okay.
And he leads the cheer with, "I shower with my dad," and then his whole team responds, "He showers with his dad," and that's their hype cheer. And I don't know, they seem pretty hyped, so clearly helped them in this game against Victoria.
See, this is the kind of color commentary you don't get when you're not at the tournament. Wow, yeah. I could have not known that and been happy.
The other funny thing, which I don't want to get this too wrong, but I'm pretty sure they are from Ohio, and I know there's that meme going around of
we don't need to say it.
Okay, yeah.
We know, and if you don't know, you can Google it. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So they end up losing to this team from Ohio. by 1. Do you know if it was Universe?
Yeah, it was Universe.
Okay, because sometimes like you could score the last one, it goes to time. So it was Universe. So UVic lost their first game, and then they go to play against BYU, and we know BYU is strong. But we talk about this later in the podcast when I have Mon and Ali on. But BYU, they don't play on Sundays, so they played some games on Friday. They were ready to go already on Saturday. Their systems are well oiled by this point in the tournament, but then they don't play Sunday, so they can never actually win tournaments. It's a tough thing for religious reasons. So UVic plays BYU and they lose 5-5. Is this a surprise to you, Ari?
No. 14-9 is actually a pretty good score. I'm pretty sure BYU Open beat Cal Poly like 15-6 on Friday, and Cal Poly ended up winning the tournament.
So it's a good score.
Yeah, it's a good score.
So UVic kind of threw it all on the line there. They end up playing UCLA, another 1-point loss. So 2 points the difference for UVic being 2-1 versus 3-0. So do you know anything about UCLA? Did you play UCLA?
We played them in the quarterfinals, yeah.
Oh.
Yes. Good team. Really solid team. Got a couple of people we've coached. One of their best handlers, Riley Kirkman Davis, who was at Cut Camp. He's played Revolver a couple times, so he's leading that squad.
Wow. Okay. So tough, first kind of start for UVic. Their final game, they end up playing against the University of Southern California, and they end up winning that game by 4. So ending the day with a dub. We love to see it. Do you know?
And maybe I'll just add too that it was the most clutch win, because if they had come last in the pool, they wouldn't have advanced to the quarters. But because BYU doesn't play on Sundays, UVic was actually bumped into the bracket play.
Okay, so even though they were 1-3, they got bumped into quarters because they were in a pool with BYU.
Into pre-quarters, the top 3 teams move on. So yeah.
Got it. Okay. Let's move on to UBC's sort of pool here. So your first game was against Grand Canyon. So I was coaching the UBC women's team when this game was on and it was being streamed, and they were all kind of on their devices, and we talked about wanting to be really focused at practice. And so I was like, okay, we're going to start by being really focused. I will update you periodically with what the scores are. And so I was like, it's 7-1. I'm like, you can just ignore this. It's not something we need to care about. And they're like, oh, okay. And then it was like 13-2. What was the final score?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
15-4?
Yeah, 15-4.
I have it right here, 15-4. So Can you tell us a little bit about how that game went?
Yeah, it was a good game. I think both teams kind of started out a bit nervous, but we ended up breaking a couple times, and it was a good game to get started and get some more depth players playing, and gave me an opportunity to go scout Cal Poly and Utah State during that game. So yeah, good overall first game.
And so in your scouting, what did you learn? Not Utah State, Utah?
Utah, sorry.
What did you learn about Utah in your scouting, and how did that come to fruition in your score?
Yeah, well, we played Utah next, I believe.
Yes.
Beat them 11-6. I think the wind started to pick up. A big tip that I took away from my scouting was that Utah hadn't really seen force middle before, and Cal Poly was forcing middle on them, and Utah seemed to have a lot of problems with it. I actually heard the coach saying, okay, so that was our first time seeing force middle. This is how you deal with it.
And you overheard them actually saying that?
Yeah.
And you're like taking notes in the bushes?
Yeah. I mean, it was a big stance, but it was a good tip to know. So we did force middle in our game, and also just threw on a couple zones that were more force middle like FSU. So that really helped. And then what I took away from Cal Poly was just more that they are solid. Took notes of a couple of their main handlers and players, and I think it did help a bit in our game against them, which we did eventually lose on Universe on the last game of the day.
Yeah, but before you spoil the last game of the day, the third game of the day, you played against Santa Barbara.
Yes.
Were you expecting this team to be really good?
Yeah, I didn't have too many notes on Santa Barbara. They were definitely solid, but I think we eventually beat them at 14-2, looks like here.
So not close.
No, not that close.
And
solid.
When you have a game like that where you absolutely obliterate somebody, how does it... We got to take our wins when they come in, Ari. How do you kind of keep your team focused and ready to honestly play a couple levels up in your final game? Because I think this was the game of the pool for Pool B, which was Cal Poly Slow versus UBC.
Yeah, I think if you know me and Guo and Jonah, our coaching staff, we're very tough on our athletes, and I think execution errors and system errors in that 14-2 game were not just breezed over because we knew who we were playing next. So keeping them focused on our systems and executing throughout our depth players too was super important throughout that game.
Yeah, and so how did that game end up going? I know you kind of preluded or kind of give a little preview that it was a universe point loss. And so were you up breaks? Did you come back? Like, how was kind of momentum in that game?
Yeah, it's actually hard to remember now. The first thing, if anyone's been to SBI, we played on this field that was like 1 foot away from a huge fence. So every team was forcing fence, because if you got into that sideline, like you were either resetting it or jamming it up the jam hole down the sideline, but you couldn't throw an OI flick. Or an OI throw, or also just hit the fence or go out of bounds. So that was part of the strategy for sure. I think we made some adjustments too late in the game, clearly, where we started to wrap a bit earlier and we were starting to generate more turns. But overall, their team is super solid. They've got a U24 stud, Calvin Brown, on the D line, which is crazy because he's one of the best throwers in America, and he's on the D line, just gunslinging it deep. And they've got some other solid O-line handlers, so really tough to stop. We did break late in the game to force universe, and then we would have had to break to win the game. We actually did get a turnover, so we did have a chance, but couldn't quite pull it through. So anyway, super stoked. And what I was really proud of was our team. You wouldn't have even known if they'd lost. Like, obviously, they weren't celebrating and cheering, but we looked up and ready and knew what we had to do the next day. So I was really proud of our team's focus.
Good. We'd love to hear it. Now, looking into pre-quarters, you ended up facing against Northeastern, and the University of Victoria ended up facing against Utah State. So your score over Northeastern was 11-5, so cruising through pre-quarters as you kind of expect to do if you're a team that's 1 point away from winning your pool. And so that set you up to play against UCLA, and this looked like a windy game?
A little bit windy, a little bit zony.
Yeah. And
a little bit chippy. So all those factors combined kind of really slowed down the game. We actually took a halftime time cap. So it was half at like 5-4 or something. We got broken twice out of half, I believe. And then, that kind of swung the momentum and we couldn't really bring it back. So tough game. They played really well. Credit to them, and their sideline was super hype. I remember this one point. I guess they will cheer as soon as we score. Like, they'll go on the field and like hype up their teammates, and they thought we scored and they started rushing the field, but then it was called out and they were still on the field and their team was trying to play. So it was pretty funny. And everyone was confused why they were on the field. But it was a tough game for sure.
Okay. So University of Victoria played Utah State, and they beat them by 1. And so they moved on to quarters as well. And so they ended up playing against University of California, and they lost quite handedly. So you two were on the same side of the bracket. So that meant that that game that you were avoiding in pool play ended up happening.
5th place semis.
Going for 5th place semis. So how did that game go for you? Spoiler alert, you lost.
Yeah, that was definitely tough. I mean, we were rolling our power lines to try and win in that UCLA game. Clearly, UVic kind of was able. I mean, they lost pretty handedly in their quarterfinal, and so they were watching our game for at least 10 or 20 minutes, cheering us on. Fair enough, that was very nice of them. But then they felt pretty well rested, and we were pretty bagged after that game. So that was tough. And I think from a coaching standpoint, we could have definitely done better to get our team up and ready for the next game, even though it was tough. But, UVic's a really good team. They've got some really solid players in the Petanuzo brothers, and Ricky McLeod's a new pickup for them, who's on Furious, and U24 studs. So, really tough team. And thankfully we get to play them again at the Dogwood Bowl. It's kind of like the UBC versus UVic annual game here in Vancouver or Victoria. And we'll see them later in the season as well.
Yeah, so after they took care of UBC, UVic went on to play Oregon and lost to them. And so they ended up finishing 6th overall. And so that meant that you got to play another regional rival in UW. And UW, people are pretty, especially at the start of the season, people were pretty high on UW, on like making a splash, making it to potentially, some people were even making hot takes that they'd make semis at nationals, for example.
That's a hot take for sure.
Well, I mean, we have more information now that we're into the season. So you ended up winning that game, which is great. It's nice to finish on a win. It's nice to finish in the top 7. How did your team kind of rally around having a tough, tight loss and then a loss to someone that's kind of like your regional rival? to play against another regional rival? How did you rally the troops to come out successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we said at the end of the day is that like this tournament is really important for points, and UBC is trying to earn a bid this year. So if we get blown out by Washington, like that's really going to have consequences at the end of the season. So the team understood that. I think Washington was a bit banged up too. I saw a couple of their players. I know one of them is probably on sockeye, I think, and he was in crutches on the sideline. So that's not great for them, but really well coached team. It came down to one like upwind break, I guess, for us near the end of the game to pull out the win, but we were trading back and forth holding the whole game. So really close game. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have more good games with them later in the season.
Yeah, so final finish, we have UVic 6, UBC 7, UW 8, and Oregon 5. Mm-hmm. All 4 Northwest teams kind of stacked on top of each other. So
and all top 4 teams are Southwest.
Definitely curious how this is going to shake out in like the more of the USAU algorithms, because a lot of the times even Charlie and Keith on their podcast said that this tournament is basically a tournament where other teams come to steal bids from the Southwest, but they said the fact that none of the open teams could crack into semis, it's a little bit different this time. So definitely curious how this will all shake out, but a really successful team for our 3 Canadian teams. We have not heard about one Canadian team yet because we're going to head over to the main event, and we've got Ali and Mon waiting for you to give you a lowdown on everything UVic women's from Santa Barbara Invite. So we'll see you on the other side.
This is Nick McFadden from the University of Manitoba Open Team, your 2022 CUUC Division I Open champions, and you're listening to the Huckin podcast, your coast-to-coast guide for all things Canadian Ultimate.
All right, everyone, welcome to the main event. I am very honored to have 2 awesome athletes that play at the University of Victoria joining with us today. We have Monica Devonshire and we have Alicia Brolly, and I'm stoked to have you here. First of all, it's my alma mater, so I love UVic, and it's just pretty cool to follow along with your team's journey this weekend. Your team does a good job of posting lots of stuff on social media to make us all kind of feel a little bit more part of it. But aside from the games and everything like that, you also had a really long bus trip that you do down, and I'm surprised that the team actually still does. So there's lots of stuff to cover. But first of all, let me have you both introduce yourselves better than I could.
Yeah, sure, I can start. I'm Monica. Most people just call me Mon. I grew up playing Ultimate on the North Shore at West Vancouver Secondary School, and then playing for Bonfire Club for juniors alongside Ali, and then captaining in my final year. And then I enrolled at UVic. I've been playing for 5 years. I'm captaining for 3 years. And then this summer I played Fusion, which is a Canadian club team, where I went to Worlds. And then I'll be graduating this year and hopefully continuing my studies for teaching and playing my final year of Ultimate eligibility.
Hi, my name is Alicia Brolly, and I've been playing Ultimate for around 10 years now. I started playing Ultimate in grade 8 at my high school, Sutherland Secondary. And my high school was like really known for Ultimate, and the sport like had more interest than other high schools around the area. And yeah, I played junior club as well with Mon, but I played from grade 9 to grade 12. And I captained for my last 2 years playing Bonfire. And I'm also in my 5th year. I've stayed alongside Monica the whole time I've been here at UVic. And this is my 2nd year of captaining on the team. And I'll also be graduating, but I'll be graduating in April. And yeah, I'm just really soaking in all the time I can get with my team and really appreciating like my last year of Ultimate with the team. Unless I come back for an extra year of eligibility, who knows? But yeah.
Yeah, there's that whole kind of thing, because you both say you're 5th years, but you can play that whole extra year. And I think if I were given that option, I would have done anything to do it. But I also don't make like the smartest life decisions. But you're both throwing me back to like the 5th year that where I was kind of graduating with a bunch of people that I've been playing all 5 years with. And again, so like this is our first tournament of the season. This is our last like bus trip and stuff. It gets very nostalgic. So Before we dive into the kind of breakdown of the games, I'm going to read something to you both because I don't think that either of you have read this. So this came out from Ultiworld earlier today. Victoria surprised many with their on-field abilities. The Devonshire siblings, I want to correct them, twins, it's way more interesting. Laura and Mon were among the most tactical players in Isla Vista. Is that the name of the sports complex?
I guess. I did not hear that anywhere.
I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
Maybe Isla Vista. Anyways, and were often staggered with playing time to ensure that there was always one field marshal playing any given point. Despite that, Alicia Brolly looked to be the best player on the team, playing great person defense and making all the right plays downfield on offense. The Canadians represented International Ultimate well and blew away most of the middle class of the tournament, showing that they were perhaps in a tier of their own, just below the other SBI semi-final contenders. Oh yeah, Alicia, you also made their all-tournament second team. So there you go. UVic making a little splashy splash. So
crazy.
Obviously a very successful weekend. You had a pretty tough starting pool, and we kind of knew that going in. You had two teams that were power ranked right away in your pool. So I would love to kind of hear from either one of you, even just this first game. So your first game was against Stanford, correct?
Yeah.
So how are you feeling going into that game? Kind of give us a rundown, because I think the score was a little bit closer than a lot of people were expecting.
Yeah. For Stanford, I think our main goal for the whole tournament was mainly just to keep the energy high all weekend and to just score as many points as we possibly could. I think also not going to Santa Barbara since 2020, it's kind of clean slate. We just were going into it with a positive attitude and just really giving it our all, not really setting any standards or expectations for ourselves or for other teams. But yeah, we kind of just went into this game with our goal to come out firing with a lot of energy. And I find with our team, we sometimes come out relatively flat at the start of the day and for our first game. So we really wanted to change that mindset and try and just come out with a lot of energy. And I think we did just that. We started on D and got scored on. Stanford held that point. And then we scored an O-line hold and then got the next point as well to get a break. So we were really excited about that, coming out with a break pretty early on in the game. And that I think that just continued throughout the game, that energy. And yeah, it was pretty much O-line holds for most of the game, going back and forth with each team. And then unfortunately Stanford broke for the last point because they had also gotten a break earlier on in the game. So final score was 8-6, but even though it was a loss, we didn't really count it as a loss. We were really proud of everyone on our team for stepping up and just proving that we can kind of go head to head with teams like Stanford. So yeah,
it was pretty incredible. Did you notice their U24 player? Did you have a specific kind of matchup for Hannah Huddleston, or did you went into the game just faceless army?
We went into the game pretty blind. I didn't know they had a U20s player. I think Abba maybe mentioned it to me, but we were coming in as dark horses and we didn't really want to set this super high expectation wow, we're playing Stanford, this isn't crazy. We want to come just on a completely clean slate.
Yeah. That works for most teams. I think people kind of put people up on a pedestal and it kind of gets in their head in not a productive way. So I sometimes like to just kind of be faceless army. So it seems like it worked for you. Mm-hmm. Your next game was against BYU, and this team, it's obviously interesting. So for the people that don't know, this school does not participate in games on Sundays. So even though they're always a top contender, they never play the Sundays of regionals, for example. So even if they earn a bid, they don't usually go to nationals, or they can't go to nationals because they don't finish their competing. So this team is a strong team. You might not have seen them in finals, but that's because they don't play Sundays. So your second game was against the Ultiworld Power Ranked number 10 team. And that was a pretty close game too. Maybe one of BYU's closest games.
Yeah, we came into the game. A couple of us had already watched their game from the night previously because they don't play on Sunday. And we did think that they were probably going to be our hardest team to play. And they were. They had a super powerful offensive line. They had huge, lethal deep strikes. And their on-field chemistry was probably unmatched compared to all the other teams at the tournament.
Yeah, so the final score was 7-12. Can you kind of take us through, like, was it like a lot of trading and then just a couple of breaks kind of chipping away here and there?
So we started on D again for that game. And then we held, I think, for the first 2 O-line points that we had. So it was like back and forth trading for holds for the first 4 points. And then BYU got 3 breaks in a row. So I think the fact that we ended up scoring 7 points against them overall, I don't think that's bad considering like we didn't really let up. We didn't let it become like a runaway game. I think we just kind of like kept pushing for like our regular systems and just trying to like focus on like making adjustments where we can. And yeah, like I think like overall like 12-7, like that's not too big of a gap. And the fact that we didn't let that slip away from us. So I'm pretty proud of everyone for scoring 7 points against them. Honestly, they were a really good team.
Mm-hmm. I thought we did a really good job. We took a pretty long half, had a long chat, and our goal for the second half was, I think, just to score 3 points or try to rack up as many points as we could, and we accomplished that goal. So we came out of the game pretty happy.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're trying to get those bids for the Northwest region. So you're putting in work.
Yeah.
I know that is a closer score rather than your next game. Unfortunately, they streamed this game. I think the other 2 games earlier in the day would have been much more interesting, but you absolutely slayed Lewis and Clark. Tell me what happened in that game.
Yeah, I think even though we had already taken 2 losses on Saturday, I think we still had our heads held high and we were like really proud of our performance. And so going into this game, we just knew we had to like keep pushing and keep playing our game and like continue with our high energy like we started off the day. And yeah, I know for this game that we saw a little bit of like poachy D from Lewis and Clark. And once we were able to find those holes and really just like learn how to like move through that D it really worked to our advantage, and we were able to find those deep looks as well off of that.
Yeah, it was definitely fun. I was like on my way to the island and I had some time for my ferry, so I pulled over and I was in like the Tawasin Mall and like streaming your game, and it was just like Huck. It was so fun to watch y'all. It was very, very exciting. So your next game, I believe, was against UCLA?
Yes, it was our crossover game.
So
4th game of the day.
You kind of laid the smack down on Lewis and Clark, and you did one even dirtier against UCLA. So can you talk about that game? Final score 15-1, is that legit?
Yeah, 15-1.
Oh my God.
So we didn't have a bye or any kind of break in between the Lewis and Clark and UCLA game. So we were super fired up. I think it really worked to our advantage that we had no break. Everyone was just ready to go. We knew UCLA was going to be a really good team while they're ranked 7th. And so I think this game just showed how depthful our roster was. Everyone was making highlight reel plays. That could have been that Nathan Kalakovich was sitting in our end zone, but everyone was just making huge bids. Like Laura Devonshire had huge flicks. Erica Edgel was just making huge undercuts, big strikes into the end zone. So really good game for us.
Nothing like a little Nathan Kalakovic to get a team hyped up. Like it works magic. It's like, oh, he's there. Like, let's just overthrow a little bit so you can lay out right in front of camera.
Yeah, exactly.
So you leave Saturday feeling like you had 2 really good games against top level teams, and you had 2 games where you just outclassed your opponent. Probably feeling pretty good going into Sunday. So you face Carleton. and they're on everybody's radar for a top contending team this year. So kind of what was your mindset kind of going into that game?
I mean, again, I think our mindset was just like bringing the same fire and energy that we started off Saturday with. And just coming in with like a positive mindset. And again, like kind of just clean slate, just focusing on our game and what we can do. And yeah, I definitely think we did come in with that energy. Carleton is a fantastic team. They've been perfecting their offensive strategies and positioning and their defensive strategies. But yeah, again, it was just to like focus on what we can do and scoring as many points as we could. And yeah, they threw some like poachy defensive stuff on us, and it was a little bit difficult at first. And once we kind of learned how to like position ourselves and move around it and find those holes, like it definitely got a bit easier on our offensive lines. But all in all, they are a fantastic team, and we just had to like try and work together to like recognize what was going on the field and like kind of strategize ways to improve our systems.
All right, so you've played Carleton. You're regrouping onto the next. You get to play against Utah, and again, kind of took care of that game, no problem. So clearly your team is learning some valuable lessons on how to bounce back and how to bounce back very strongly. So can you take us a little bit through that game?
So yeah, for the Utah game, we knew that going into it, we had to win this game in order to make finals for 5th place. And at this point in the day, we were kind of feeling that like second day tiredness, and it became like a lot more intense in that part of the day. So we honestly really just tried to like uplift each other and like push through that tiredness. And yeah, what we saw from the Utah defensive side was that they played zone pretty much throughout the whole game. It was quite windy for most of the tournament actually, but mainly for day 2 it was a lot windier. But yeah, they didn't call off their zone, and they held it all the way until the end zone, which kind of threw us off because we've played like a very minimal amount of teams that have just like held their zone all the way to the end of the field. But we were able to make just some offensive adjustments to continue our zone O just all the way until we worked it into the end zone. And by doing that, we were able to have less error and score points more easily. So it was definitely a fun game. I believe Utah was the team we were like singing and dancing with on the sideline and stuff. I think they were like a super fun team to play, and like their spirit was really, really good. So it was nice to see that in like a competitive setting. We're both obviously wanting to make it to compete for 5th place. But yeah, I would say personally, like my experience against Utah was probably the most fun team to play against.
Yeah, and we had some pretty big standout players. We had Jess Carroll, who's technically one of our COVID rookies, but is playing as a vet now, and she had a huge layout. Her first layout ever was massive in the end zone, I think one of our first points. So that started off our game just like on this major high. And then after that, we scored a couple breaks and just went from there.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a rookie on a team doing something at the beginning of a game to just like completely change the tone of the game. That happened for traffic at Nationals. One of our rookies had a sick layout in like the second point of our first game, and then we're like, it's all over for you all. It's such a good statement. If you're a rookie and you haven't laid out yet, just do it at the beginning of the game because it'll just fire everyone up so much. So yeah, final score was 11-3 over Utah. So another statement game. Final game, playing against UC Davis. So this team, Ultiworld is pretty high on, or they were pretty high on going into the tournament. Final game of the day. How many people were still cleated at this point?
We had about 16 players.
16
fully
with,
cleated.
I'd say a couple kind of stragglers that were like maybe playing like every so often and not playing every other point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mainly 16 though.
Yeah, how'd that game go for y'all?
Well, first off, we were just absolutely hyped to be playing for 5th. So we came out guns firing. Everyone was using their last piece of energy for that game. California Davis came out with a zone, and I think all the other games previously really helped us perfect our zone. We were really working on give and goes, working it horizontally across the field. We had Abba come back as a fourth handler. Lucy Bridle came back to become one of our primary handlers, so we had a lot of support. We were able just to work it all the way slowly up to their end zone.
Yeah, and I think probably at this point in the day it was the most windy. And so those typical hucks that we had been doing all weekend became really hard, especially in a zone, but it was like super windy. So we had to stay disciplined and stay composed and just work it up the field with those shorter passes, which once we started doing that, it was easy breezy.
We did the same thing with ABBA for U20. We had I originally had ABBA as a cutter, and then we were getting zoned so much. We're like, can you just every other? That would be great. Thank you so much. So very successful tournament for y'all. The only 3 teams you lost to were the 3 teams that were kind of in the top of the whole tournament. You crushed everyone else, basically. Even Ultiworld said that you took them by surprise. They didn't even have you in their non-ranked teams to watch list either. And now they think that you're a strong bid contender, which, duh, I always had the faith. They also said that they thought that the Northwest region is looking like the strongest region as well, which at Bellingham Invite, it's hard to tell because the weather is just such garbage when UW, Oregon, all these teams are all playing together and everybody looks rough. So it was kind of nice to see one of our Northwest homies go down there and just be able to play actual Ultimate instead of this weird rugby hybrid that we have to play at Bellingham Invite. So last little bit that I'm going to ask about from both of you is to explain to the general population the wacky world of the Pegasus trip from Victoria to Santa Barbara, because it is a UVic classic, and you still hold on to some traditions that they did back in my first year. So tell us all about it.
We still have the same bus drivers going down, I think, when
it's the same
Danie
people?
Was playing. Yep, what's their names again?
Brennan Jason.
No, that's so funny.
Yeah, so it's a 30-hour bus ride. We had 41 people going down. There's positives and negatives of the trip. I think positives is you're sitting on a bus with someone for 30 hours. There's a ton of bonding, socializing. No one really does their homework. We're playing games, going down. We have a little talent show on the way back where everyone does a fun, wacky little talent. So everyone bonds really well. I think our rookies really, really like the bus ride down. And it's a rite of passage for UVic players to go on the bus down.
Yeah, and it was nice to see, I would say probably half of the bus had never been down to Santa Barbara and taken this bus ride before, even though, they've been on the team for, 2-3 years now? So it was just nice to see, everyone kind of, not really knowing what to expect, but some, for, Monica and myself, being you're gonna have so much fun, you don't even know. And yeah, it was just a really good bonding experience. I mean, I definitely think the positives outweigh the negatives for the bus ride. Everyone I talked to before going on the ride down was 30-hour bus ride. That sounds horrible. Why would you ever want to do that? But I feel it's something that you definitely have to just do in order to understand how much you can get out of it, especially for bonding and stuff. I mean, the negatives would be just you are sitting on a bus for pretty much 30 hours and kind of get stiff legs and can be mentally and physically draining because you have to sleep on the bus and there's only so much comfort you can get with sleeping on a bus. So yeah, I always look forward to the bus ride. Sometimes it can be a little bit okay, when are we there? Are we there yet? But
I would probably also say, unlike most teams, or I wouldn't say unlike most teams, but our team has a really strong bond with the men's team. And the men's team this year has a ton of rookies, so lots of us don't really know them that well. So the bus trip is really essential for bonding, and they came out to all our games. I know for the Lewis and Clark game, they came, and those connections were formed on the bus ride. And I think the men's team also, shout out men's team, they really helped us throughout the tournament.
Like literally nothing has changed. It makes my heart feel so happy. And you watch Top Gun as well, right?
We watched both Top Gun movies.
We realized we didn't have the Top Gun movie, the like original one. I guess someone had forgot it at their house, and then everyone started freaking out, like, we don't have Top Gun. What are we gonna do? But shout out Taryn. She had the great idea to find it at Safeway. So we were able to buy it at a Safeway and keep the tradition going.
So I have very fond memories of the talent shows. I have very fond memories of the bus rides, but I definitely remember getting off the bus in Santa Barbara and just being like, I need my hotel room now, and just feeling very impatient because, and even on the Ultiworld podcast, they were talking about how this one team didn't look that great because of like the travel time or whatever. And I'm like, do you understand what it's like to only have 16 people playing and to have shipped all of those people down there on a bus and they haven't slept and they still perform at that level? Like they don't understand. So it's, as you all said, like it's a rite of passage. It's something that is a super special part about the UVic culture. The men's and women's teams being super connected is also a really important part of the culture there. Do they still sing Afternoon Delight to y'all?
Yeah, well, yeah. I actually have a video of it. I took a video for their last game when they placed 6th. I took a video of it and they still do it. Yep.
Wow, UVic is very culty. It sounded like...
Like you had the same cheer that we made up in like second year, and then you even hated it. I know. I heard it changed. Thank God, because it was really bad before and not relevant anymore for your team. So I think that if you're like a junior and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, which college should I go to? You got 2 great options between UBC and UVic. I'm a homer for both, and I think that, I mean, you can learn a little bit from what Mon and Ali are saying here, that team culture, if you want to go to a school where there's family vibes and you can make a big impact on the field right away as well. Like you create a lot of meaningful opportunities for rookies coming up as well. So I just want to thank you both for coming on here. It's been a pleasure for me to hear you talk about UVic things. And yeah, we're just like really proud of your school and what you're doing for the Northwest and what you're doing for Canada. So yeah, thank you again for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, no worries. So if you're listening to this, stay tuned. We're going to head to the outro after a quick break.
Hey, this is Leanne Campbell from the McGill Ultimate Team, your 2022 Huckin A Div 1 College Women's Player of the Year. And you're listening to the Huckin A podcast, your coast-to-coast guide for all things Canadian Ultimate.
So there you have it, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode, our Santa Barbara recap. Ari, how was your first experience co-hosting the Huckin A podcast with your wifey?
I'm so honored. I'm just so honored and grateful to be in the presence of my wifey in said podcast setting. So hopefully I'll be back soon. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It was a pleasure. It's cool to hear from all 3 teams. It was fun for me to go back on memory lane. But if you were catching all the action at Santa Barbara Invite because you maybe are a subscriber to Ultiworld, you can watch all the videos and everything, and you subscribe. So you should come over to our subscriber only section where I am going to ask Ari about his kind of like juniors to furious experience pipeline potentially. So for all of you that are listening that want to make a top clubs team, if you don't necessarily like play on one right at the moment, give it a good listen. Just gonna throw some saucy tips and tricks for how to get yourself noticed at tryouts. So if you're not a subscriber, what are you doing with your life? Hit us up on socials, Instagram, YouTube, like, subscribe, smash it. Goodbye.